So, you've built your Gunpla, and now you want to display them, but they just don't look quite right. Well, that's what this video is here to help you with. Hi, I'm Yink, and welcome to Posing Gunpla Tips and Tricks. Let's start off with something simple. Just a basic neutral standing pose. Something that you could put just on a shelf with a bunch of other figures or in some sort of hanger. The most important thing is to make sure that everything is lined up. Because if things are on the wonk, it doesn't look quite right. So, first thing to do is to straighten it out as much as possible. Now, this isn't perfect, but it is a lot better. Next thing you want to do is just rotate the legs outward just a tiny bit. Not a full action stance, just a little bit. Also, you do want to make sure that the ankles are in the same position, since that actually makes a pretty big difference in how straight a mobile suit stands. The next thing you want to do is make sure that the knees are very slightly bent, and also you're going to want to bend the ankles just forward a little bit so you get a little bit of a bow to the leg. It's kind of hard to show with the shield on this side. Get a little bit that way. Now we have the legs pretty much correctly standing. You want to make sure that the torso is standing pretty much as straight as you can. You want the head to be looking straight forward, down slightly, and you want to make sure that the shoulders are pushed in and almost level, maybe angled very slightly upwards, just a little bit more of a dynamic appearance. You want to have the elbows bent slightly and also angled in just a little bit. And there you go. It's standing pretty much in a fairly neutral stance. You may want to bring the arms in just a little bit more towards the sides, just to have it slightly more relaxed, but that is how you give a mobile suit a pretty standard neutral pose. Sorry, I don't have a turntable. This is the best I can do. Now, what if you don't just want a standard neutral standing pose? What if you want it to be holding a weapon? Well, the Zaku F2 is a pretty good example of this, because the torso doesn't have a lot of movement, but it is pretty expressive. You want to bring the arms forward on hinges, if it has them. There are a few kits that don't. You want to bring up the arm that's going to be holding the rifle. You want to bend the elbow on the one that's holding the rifle pretty much as far as it'll go. You want to bring this arm out and down just a little bit. And one thing that you probably wouldn't think of is you want to bring the opposite foot forward a little bit and turn them slightly. You can also give this knee a little bit more of a bend, and from here you can either have it holding it in an attack pose, or lowering both the arms together slightly and straightening this leg back out a bit into more of a neutral, just standing at the ready pose. This is pretty much the same as the standard pose, just with the legs spread a little bit more and with the arms brought up. Now, let's talk about melee weapons, because it's a completely different beast to dealing with actual firearms. And it's good to use the Gyan as the example, as it's one of the suits that you can't just bend the beam effect. Now, one tip that has sort of circulated around, and yeah, it works, is if you have a sort of standard beam saber. You can just heat up the blade with some hot water and then just give it a little, bend, and then it'll have a bend in it for a swing. You can't do that with the Gyan and quite a few other suits. Like the Age suits have flat beam sabers, and you can't really do it with those. And the Gelgoog has the beam Naginata, which is a curved blade, so you can't exactly bend that. So really the important thing to remember is to work within the limitations of what you have. Even with kits that don't have a ton of articulation like a Dom, you can still get pretty good melee poses with its weapons. Now, currently I have the Gyan in its, standard ready pose, but if you want it to be in a forward swing, it's actually not that difficult. You want to have it stepping forward with its main leg, rotate the body forward, obviously have the head looking towards whatever you're trying to hit, just bring the arm out, and here's something important. Angle it back slightly. Now, if you want it near the end of a swing, you're going to want to bring the arm pretty much straight, bring the blade as far forward as you can, and have the suit leaning into the strike. You can also have it readying swing by bringing it up, or swinging across its body by rotating the arm this way. Gyan is also a good example because it has a shield, and that's something you really want to keep in mind when posing melee weapons, is that if the suit has a shield, there's always the option of having it guarding. Now, what if a kit has a lot of stuff on it and is kind of bulky? Well, you just kind of have to work around it. With, say, the Gym 3, my favorite gym, it has a lot of additional bulk over, regular gyms. So, despite having good joints, it's kind of hard to get the arm in a certain pose, since the shield really bumps up against the missile pods on the shoulders. So you just kind of want to keep the shield on, get it in such a way that it just sort of works around. Use the other arm that doesn't have anything impeding it, and use the legs in order to make it look more dynamic. And here you can see that even despite basically not moving this arm or either of the shoulders, still has a very nice and dynamic pose. And what about kits that don't have a lot of articulation? Well, you have to take advantage of what articulation a kit has. The GOG, for example, doesn't have a ton of articulation, obviously, because of the design and the age, but it does have pretty good ball joints at the hip, a 90-degree bend at the knee, pretty good ankles, and a full rotation up at the shoulder. So even though it has basically nothing at the waist or for the head, you can still get it in a pretty good action pose. And another little trick is don't be afraid to stretch what you consider articulation, such as if you pull up on the waist a little bit, you could suddenly get a full rotation, though it does leave a bit of a gap, so you kind of have to hide it a bit. But it does mean that you get more of a turn. And speaking of limited articulation, let's take the Jagan as an example. single jointed elbows that get just above 90 degrees, and ball jointed hips. Now, obviously you can get it in a pretty nice generic standing pose. Those joints don't really affect that. But for an action pose, you may have a bit of trouble fighting against them, which is where I would recommend a stand. In this case, part of an Action Base 4, but any stand with a 3mm port, assuming the kit has them, will do. I recommend getting Action Base 4s since they have enough alternative options if they don't have a 3mm port that you can pretty much put any kit that you want on them. Anyways, pretty simple. You just, plug the Action Base into wherever the port is. Give me a moment to move the camera. Now for flight poses, you pretty much exclusively want to bring one leg up and the other one back slightly. Spread the hips pretty much as far as they'll go. And make sure to point the feet backwards. One small little tip I didn't mention earlier: if it has a double jointed elbow or knee, bend whichever joint looks better first. Sometimes you just have to bend both of them at the same time so that it just flows nicely. As you can see with this knee, if you bend this one first, it looks kind of broken. But if you bend the top joint first, you can get all the way back to here, and then you can get that extra little bit with that joint, and it looks natural. You want to bring the torso sort of slightly to a side, bring the head up a bit so that it's looking forward. You want to bend an arm. This also kind of has a problem with the shield hitting the shoulder, just like the Gym 3, so just get it, everything you want flowing sort of in this general direction. And as for the rifle arm, there's a lot of different things you could do. You could leave it back, you could bring it up, you can bring it like all the way up if you want. Personally, I kind of like having sort of this pose going on with it. Alternatively, you can turn the waist even more. Turn the head so that it's looking in the direction you want. And have the arm outstretched slightly. And that gives it the appearance of it's actually sort of dashing towards an enemy. Or at the very least aiming at one. And really this pose kind of shows off an important thing about posing, is you end up getting sort of a feel for it, but you need to keep in mind how things flow. As you can see with this one, as I turn it, you can still see the direction that the suit is traveling in. If you want to pose something in a way where it's moving, you have to give it the weight of it being moved. A good way to get a feel for this is to try to copy poses with your kits using actual real life references of people running or jumping or swinging a weapon. Just Google pictures, it's not that hard. And also the pictures that they show in the actual instructions of kits you get. Those are usually poses that the kit are meant to be able to pull off, so copy those. But there is one final thing I want to talk about, and that is pairing suits together. Whether that be the example I'm going to do of suits being on the same team and having them pose together, or rival suits that you want to have fighting one another. A very easy way to make suits look way more dynamic on a shelf is to have them actually posed together intentionally. Now, for this, I'm going to be using the White Base Crew because it's 3 suits, and it also lets me show off how to pose something that basically has no articulation, that being the gun tank. Let's start off with the gun tank, since it'll be fairly quick. Doesn't really have a lot of articulation anyway. You want to bring cannons up, and one small thing I want to talk about is force perspective. Having one cannon be raised slightly higher, one way or the other, as you can see here, when you have it at an angle, they both look like they're going at the same angle, even though they aren't. When you bring up arms, which don't even get 90 degrees, but that's fine, it's a gun tank. From this angle, they both look like they're at the same proportion, but they're not. You want to rotate the waist just a little bit. Just get it, yeah, a little bit more force perspective going on there. Then moving on to the gun cannon. This is the Revive, and as such it has a ton of articulation. Just want to bring this leg forward just a little bit. Turn the head, so that's looking forward. Bring both of these cannons down. Bring the back one down a little bit more. Then take advantage of the fact that it includes an open hand to have it. It's easier to show it back here. I'm trying to keep the light on it. Bring the hand up and have it brace. Have it looking forward. Maybe spread the legs just a little bit more. And bend this elbow slightly so that it's holding the rifle forward. And then for the Gundam itself, I want to spread the legs a little bit more. Maybe bend this knee back slightly and adjust it so that the feet are still firmly planted. Make sure that the hips are facing pretty much straight up. You can turn the torso a little bit. Make sure the head is facing forward. Keep this arm out to the side and bend the elbow a little bit so that it has a slightly more dynamic shot. And you can either leave this rifle down or bringing up into the elbow. And there we have. Maybe bringing them a little bit closer together. There we have all three of them posed together. And as you can see, it looks a lot better than if we just have the Gundam by itself. So those are some pretty basic tips and tricks on how to pose your Gunpla in ways that are aesthetically pleasing. And as you'll see by the B footage, I have all of my kits posed, and hopefully you'll notice what I mean by having things flow together. But that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, it helps a lot. Subscribe for future reviews and watch my backlog. Go follow me on Twitter for updates, and consider supporting me on Patreon so I can keep making videos just like this one. And as always, until next time, happy building.